Okay, so I've been sitting here for almost an hour thinking this through and different parts about it and everything to be able to tell people. What I hate about that is whenever I go through it, I leave out some real important ones sometimes, but I also bring up some other ones that maybe I hadn't thought of before, and that's one of the reasons I like just winging it. But we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons first, just to give you a base, okay? And I know some of y'all probably are, not into it in any way, shape, or form. And I just want to give you an idea what it's like for those other people then, okay? And something about it. For what we're looking at here are the dice that you use when you play the game. And whenever I tell you that little things came to me whenever I was a kid, literally there was a point where I was playing Dungeons and Dragons. I had the full dice set finally, and hear Wheel in the Sky from Journey. Dude's got a Pink Floyd album cover that's got the prism that looks like a pyramid with the light cutting through it, and it vents out and turns into the spectrum of the rainbow. And the Journey album cover and everything, and all snap. I remember actually out loud like saying, "Oh damn," just out of nowhere, and they're like, "What the hell's going on?" I go, "Give me a minute," and I took a piece of paper and flipped it over and started writing and do a little thing. Anyhow, and what was such a mind blower about that was, like, I'd say it's all around me. Here I am playing this game for weeks that uses these shapes and structures to figure out the percentages of what's going to happen in the game. And yet that is this sacred geometry that I end up searching so hard to find and figure out things about later. And it's right there, and it's in your face. And so if you look at this, there's my pointer. There's this pyramid right here. And if you look, the top numbers are 3, like you see there, 3, 3. You can't see the other one, but so that would be a 3 that person rolled. This is an 8-sided dice, and if you look, it's really 2 pyramids with the butts stuck together. That's a 4-sided dice. There's 8. Just makes sense, right? And this guy rolled an 8. Now that can be good or that can be bad. There are certain times you'd want to roll low, or certain times you want to roll high. Like an encounter, you'd want to roll low, and because if you roll a high number, you can get a counter. A lot of times people will say, well, 6 and above gets an encounter, and 6, 7, and 8 might even mean which encounter you run into. Or a lot of times DMs will already have it figured out, and even though it looks like it, they'll know which one you're going to run into because it's a cool setup. Anyhow, so that's that. Now this one on this side and that one on the far side right there are 10-sided dice. You're only looking at 5 sides of it, but it's got it on the other side too, and it's laying on a flat face on its bottom, exposing one up to the top. Now it's got a 7 here that he rolled, and then over here though it's based in tens. It says 50. Well, what people did lots of times was they would have 2 10-sided dice, and one color you would call as being your 10s, and the other one's your 1s. So you couldn't cheat or go, the best of, or do anything like that. So you'd have a black and a white one, and the black one would be the 10s, and the other one would be the 1s, whatever. And in this case, if you have it set up like that, then this is your 10s over here, and this is your 1s over here, right? Then, let's go ahead and skip up here. This is a 12-sided dice, and it's real famous in all kinds of circles, but not so much in D&D. For there are few weapons or anything that you get to use a 12-sided dice in. Whenever you fight somebody, you basically have arrows, and that's a 4-sided dice. So all you can do is 4-sided dice. You can get an elven point, you can get this, you can get +1 arrows, and it's going to be 5 if you roll a 4, and things like that going on, but not too much. Swords will run a 6-sided dice. You might have a bastard sword or a 2-handed sword, and it's going to roll either an 8 or a 10 depending on that. And so really you don't get up into 12s, although you could say you had some magic sword. What they usually do is just turn around and, well, it's one of these other ones, but it's a +3, +5, whatever it is, and what their damage ratio is on it and things like that. And then some weapons that you get are more damage versus certain creatures, like the undead or werewolves or something like that. And of course, this always gets convenient for you, but lots of times you'll have a weapon that's for werewolves and you'll be fighting a ghost. So what are you going to do? Well, you still fight him. You just ain't got a bonus. And you might choose different things to do and stuff like that, and blah, 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 right? So now we got the one that's right in the middle there. And, well, that would be skipping this guy. And he's real important. That's a 6-sided dice, and that's the one everybody knows, right? Everybody knows. So we're going to skip that for a second and come back to it. It's a 20-sided dice. And if you look, he rolled a 20, and that's real lucky, because usually this is your damage dice on your percentage chance to roll to hit. So if you're, see if you're going to hit something. And armor and things and toughness of hit is used to be considered THACO. This was do hit armor class 0. That's it, whatever the armor class is 0. So you'd have a number. So you'd pretty much know what it was to hit the guy, and you had to roll it with that number. But you had bonuses too, based on certain things. You might have a +2 or 3, and it takes a 15 to hit, but you rolled a 13, but +2 is 15, and you hit. And so you get to do your damage. If you don't hit, you don't do your damage. And so you could imagine somebody that's using a bunch of chainmail and magical stuff on him is going to be harder to hit than somebody that's standing there naked in a towel. And although not necessarily, you could say that you're trying to fight Loki or something, and him naked in a towel's got an AC that beats most people in metal armor. But let's not go there, all right? But you can see a concept of going on. Well, one more thing. Now we're going to go to the one we're missing here, and that's a 6-sided dice. And he rolled a 1, and that sucks. And it really sucks whenever you get a sword and you hit somebody and you go through all the trouble and wham, and what do? 1. That really sucks. How many ones you got to roll to hit that guy to kill him? Well, he's got 88 hit points, so it's 88 times unless you start rolling some better numbers. By the way, he just rolled a 20 on you, and wham, you took damage, and oh no. And people thought, now let me just break out for a second. People thought whenever I was a kid, and then this rumor got around, that kids were going around stabbing each other with swords and doing something and drinking something weird, and you know, it's just like the Halloween candy bullshit and some of these propaganda things that get around about it. And after long trying to figure it out, I found out where they say that what happened was some kids who played D&D were playing around with some of their father's swords. And my dad had a katana set, big one and a small one, that he got from overseas. It wasn't a real one. We weren't supposed to fuck with it and everything, because you go around trying to chop on a tree with it and the handle is going to break off on it. It's a display, and it'll work for a little bit, and it might defend you a little here, but it's not a samurai weapon here. It's not a real one. But you can still poke somebody with it, and if you had a sharp sword, you'd poke somebody with it. And so what supposedly happened with these kids is they were running around the house or doing whatever, but the story all of a sudden was in a sewer, because that's dungeons. And one went around the corner, and it caught the other one, and it poked him in his stomach. Now the story is, oh, it killed him. And then you come to find out that the story that it started from wasn't that he killed him, but blah, 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 and kids ought to quit doing this, Dungeons and Dragons, and be more careful, and can't you get foam swords and all these things out? And of course the Dungeons and Dragons people are like, what are you talking about? I might have a fake sword or something that I got at, Renaissance Festival and everything, but we're not hitting each other here at all. This is a dice game, and it's built on intelligence, and it's all in your mind, and it's totally different than you think it is. For, there might be some pictures and descriptions and done like that, and then everything else, and you're going to think of it a little different than other people, but at the same time, we're all going through this, and so it's like going through a book, and Nancy Drew mysteries and things like that, if you will. Sorry. And all these things you have to roll an intelligence check to see if you can figure out this language, or you can do this other, because you have the thing with languages. And so you roll different percentages of it. And so you can imagine, now think about this, that this 4-sided dice here is a 25% chance to roll a 4 or a 1 or whatever number you pick. But, you'd say, roll a 4. And so you only had a 25% chance, 75% chance it ain't going to be a 4, and you flip it. Right? Everything breaks down in different percentages. You get a 10-sided dice, and it's real easy to say that it's 10%, and you got a 10% chance. And so if somebody said a 20% chance, you got to roll a 1 or a 2, or that don't work. You got a 20-sided dice, though. And so 20-sided dice, 2 times 5 is 10. So there's 5% increments and all of that too, and you could base that off of that. So you could use either one of those in a lot of those situations. The six-sided dice, these different ones break down in some weird numbers, but a six-sided dice ends up coming out to 16.66%. There's 666. It's also the cube of the sun and all of these things, and this is magic right here, and we're playing D&D, and we're playing magic, and we're in an ancient world of magic and talking about magic and all this bullshit, right? Well, this is sacred magic. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about the finger of God. I'm literally talking about that and what the ancients knew, and nowadays we've mulled over it and got so far past it, really, that sometimes when you look back at simple things like this, people are like, oh, okay, so that was it? And it's like, dude, it sometimes it means a whole lot more. What do you mean a whole lot more? Well, for 2,000 years, people were freaking out over this, and it's been a secret for thousands of years. How long? Its pyramids are based on it, just like that four-sided dice right there. But this geometry shows all kinds of weird things. You can imagine now, check out the symbology in numbers. Now it cuts down just simple things to where that 12-sided dice there, whenever you make it, that automatically becomes a hexagram. Or, I mean, a pentagon. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. So, that's a pentagon, just like the pentagon in the United States, right? 12-sided dice, 12, right there, pentagon. But if I put points on all of that, that's a pentagram. And, oh, that's black magic evil. And of course we can get a hexagram, and then that'll make a 6-pointed star, and that's evil too. Or some people say, well, that's got to be good, that's the Star of David and stuff. Well, no, and all these people knew that was all these numbers and things, and trying, see, here's what it was, guys. For one viewpoint, trying to find out the finger of God is bad. Why is it bad? Well, you could unleash Pandora's box, or make everything go away. And I'm telling you that these shapes and knowledge that came out of that eventually, and it could have come a lot faster, it was delayed, but the knowledge that came out of this is what created the atomic bomb. I know that sounds far-fetched and everything, but it's not really. All these different solids that are here, this guy right here has got a 5-pointed star on it, and that goes with that, doesn't it? And you can actually put that star inside of that. And if you made these bigger and smaller than each other, you can actually put these all inside of each other. And it's how gravity works, and it's how everything from as small as an atom to as big as our galaxy. These galaxies are built on these spirals and things that work off of sacred geometry. It shows you that gravity tries to make this happen, and the G particle, the God particle, and gravity, and this G that we've been looking for, and where it's found, and the fingerprints of the gods, not to use his words, but the fingerprints of the gods can be found within these shapes and math. And everybody says, well, we made up math. And you're like, not really. Math seems something simple as 1 and 1 is 2 and 1 is 3. I mean, 2 and 2 is 4. Here we go. But then there's percentages and things like that, and ratios. And people started figuring out ratios, and then they checked out things like plants and the shape of certain animals when they started trying to draw them. And I'll be damned if it doesn't show up in the center of a sunflower, in the way that the petals lay out, in the amount of leaves coming off of something, in the shape of a rose, in the ripples of a pond, and everything around you. And I don't want to scare you whenever I say this, but after I show you all this stuff, and believe me, I'm not the guy that's going to, if somebody was to completely teach you this correctly, it would be like a whole class. you couldn't get it in one seminar. You could get the gist in one seminar, but then you wouldn't have any back. So I'm trying to give you some back and then try to show you where I came from. Can you imagine a kid that's just in his teens starting to figure out some of this stuff and put it all together, and all of a sudden you're playing this game and doing these things, and then this shit comes up, and all of a sudden you go, oh my, whoa, and then you realize, no, whoa, and it starts going levels like an onions of whoa in one moment. I mean, some of these philosophers, whenever they figured out this, they said eureka and started tearing off their clothes and running around and freaking out. But I didn't do that in front of my friends playing D&D. But I said, oh, god damn, and I started laughing. And then I give them a moment, and then, if I remember correctly, people were like, okay, this is probably pizza time, guys. So there's even more to this if you just look at it. These things are done here in metal. There's a close-up of it, but they're done here in metal. And you can get all kinds of different colors of them, by the way, and it looks kick-ass. But what they've done is and some people will get a bunch of different sets, and they'll use one for this and one for that, and this may be your major set that you're using, and usually a dungeon master will have 2 or 3 going on, their major attack one in this, but maybe even one for each one of the guys for this type of thing or that type of thing, and you can get silly with it. But what this is enameled inside of it. It's kind of like glass. It's been enameled in the inside of it, of metal and stuff, and then you think, well, so that's all new and everything, and you go, no, man, maybe a wine glass is new, but the idea of glass goes back way the hell longer than that, and then faience and stuff that's used like this, and inlays and stuff like this were hand carved out and inset, and ancient Egyptian shit and people stuff, and gemstones encrusted in things that, whenever I play D&D, we turn it into an artifact, and it has magic powers due to who used to have it. And then you say you've got that now or whatever, and you may use this artifact, or it may be for some other purpose. A lot of times to keep people from getting too overpowered and stuff, but you want to have them find something cool. You're on a quest for a king to find the Heartstone. No, you're not going to get the Heartstone. You're going to give it to the king, and then he's not even going to use it. He's going to put it back in the mountain where it's supposed to be and kick off the doors and forge again. But it sounds real simple, but then you go through this whole crap, and you can stretch it out for weeks if you want to, worth of playing, if you only played once or twice a week, for sure. Anyhow, guys, I could go on and on and on, but let's just try to break into something here. For I'm trying to give a primer, and I believe the primer is going to run a few videos. You know, just knowing my style. Where am I at? 17 minutes. I'm going to try to do this where it ends under 45. And I'm sorry to stretch this out for anybody, but if we get into this correctly, it has to be done correctly. So you kind of understand. I mean, if we were just sitting there talking about a spider web, and you didn't even know the creature that created it, it'd kind of be screwed up. So you have to kind of go off thing, and if somebody started describing how they build it, maybe that'd mean a whole lot difference. And let's see, is this centered pretty well? Somewhat, but believe me, I'm just going to go over this. You can go to Wiki and go to Golden Ratio and find all this information out here. I'm going to expound upon it a little bit and tell you applied forms and stuff, but basically just going to go off basics here first. Before it gets complicated, even in this, in fact, there are mathematical things down here that are just, what the hell? So the golden ratio is basically like, what is it, 1.61803397778, something like that. And I used to know it to like 10 or 12 places, and also pi. Pi is 3.1416, whatever. And so these are weird things. They're known as irrational numbers. And an irrational number is a number that you can't divide and get out, and so it has a decimal point that can literally run forever, and it also doesn't have a sequence to that it runs. It runs a random. There's not quite a perfect. It's focusing to a point, if you will. That helps. And oh, there it is right there, 1.161833987. So yeah, I was wrong right here in like 100,000ths. But basically what it is 1 plus the square root of 5 divided by 2. and that is this symbol here, and it's called phi. Now, not pi, but phi, P-H-I. And phi, which you might know from going to college, and Phi Kappa Delta and the symbols that they have for it. And what it usually is it looks like a cursive P. I'm not even going to show it. I'll show it here in a minute. Well, let's just go down and find it here. If they don't, say if they don't have it, they're stupid. So what we have here is the symbol of pi. Now, we're using modern typeset to do this, but in ancient typeset, there was just a pin running through a ball. And literally that ball was just a hair wider than it is tall, like a pumpkin. Can you see it? Our modern interpretation is a P, and if you took this part of the P off of it, you kind of get a cursive P going on. Phi Kappa Delta, Phi Kappa Nu. If you think about this, and the fact that it's really just a stick or a pedestal that's holding up the earth, or a standpoint, it's actually running through the axle of it right here, and this is a globe. This is the earth, and it's used to measure it. We're not going to get totally into it on this one, but I'm going to show you later how digits on your fingers add up to ratios and bones in your body that add up to ratios and numbers with 12 and things that are based on it and all this sacred geometry. And not only does it go from as bitty as your finger, but it goes down to an atom, but it also goes all the way up to the distance and how they figured out the distance to the sun and the moon and how big it is and how big around the world is, and oh, they thought the world was flat. Bullsh. No. You look at these old people and Greeks and everything, in your Bible it says that it was flat and built like a snow globe. And the Assyrians got that from what they read out of the Sumerian tablets, but they didn't get it figured out. Seems like if you put a modern thing on it and what they thought, that you'd figure out in the firmament, and it's water above and water below, and there's water in space and coming in and all that stuff. But firmament above and firmament below, from their point of view, would have been an ice cap up here. There's firmament above, and there's firmament below. And what's in the middle part? Whenever he goes up to heaven and he looks back on the tablets and describes how people get small like ants, and the world is what? The world is brown and blue, white on the top and white on the bottom. And there's white blotches around on that. What the hell's that? That's clouds. But he wasn't describing clouds when he was saying that it was white on the top and white on the bottom. Anyhow, so that's phi, right? And so they talk about history. There can be history in mathematics and art. So we could go there and start talking about great artists used mathematics. All the ones you're thinking of right now, yeah, and Leonardo da Vinci and stuff, yeah, he had it all in their figures. So what about, what about the, yeah, yeah. They even said the Mona Lisa is done with it. Faces have this symbology all into it in the shape of your face. You can draw it with little circles and lines and cuts. If you ever saw somebody try to draw somebody, how they can put these lines in based on your face structure, on whether you're an oval or this, that, and the other, throw it in and then kind of erase those back out and start working with it, looking at your face, and throw it in there and bam. And it's all based on ratios. You try to get the lip ratio right on your face, and then the nose ratio correct to that. Blah, 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 blah. Simple how it works, but then again, it's not like I can draw faces real well or anything like that. Some of the greatest mathematical minds of all ages, from Pythagoras to Euclid in ancient Greece, through the medieval Italian mathematician Leonardo of Pisa, Renaissance astronomer Johannes Kepler, to present-day scientific figures such as Oxford physicist Roger Penrose, and have spent endless hours over this simple ratio and its properties. Biologists, artists, musicians, historians, architects, psychologists, and even mystics have pondered and debated the basis of its ubiquity and appeal. In fact, it's probably fair to say that the golden ratio has inspired thinkers of all disciplines like no other number in the history of mathematics. Why? Well, it seems like it's kind of like proto-science. Let's say that. Let's say that magic was proto-science. Because you can imagine, if I was to, in front of you, take this stuff that looked like burnt charcoal, some stuff that looked like salt, and some stuff that looked like crushed up potato chips, kind of yellowish, and I was to sit and grind those up, and then I was going to tell you that I was going to, by a triple of magic, make something incredible, and out of a ratio I put these together, stirred them around real good, and flicked it in the fire, and it went whoosh, and blew up like gunpowder, because all it would take is, saltpeter, charcoal. It's pretty simple to put together, but somebody has to put it together. You can imagine it was probably done by mistake at one time, but that's magic. That's still magic today to children. Whenever you go, somebody's going to go light this thing off, it's going to go zip up in the air and boom, and make something real pretty, looks like a flower. It's magic. If you don't think so, take a kid to Disney World and watch the fireworks show go off, and turn around and look in their eyes, and you'll see a magic you never knew you forgot about, that you had inside you when you were a kid. And so we dream about fairies and all these type of things, but people that made up those mythologies were doing the same thing, and damn it, they were adults. And there's more to mythology than meets the eye, and I'm showing you in hundreds of different ways, but this seems to be a little important. This is, that web that we talk about that's going all over the place, and I'm trying to show you things that make attachments, and eventually we're going to make wonderful pig or whatever across this thing. This, whenever you do this, there's got to be some points that you've stuck some pins in this crap. This one could be the middle. It's at least one of the major key points and pinpoints. Depends on how much levity you give it, to how much levity you say that the ancient people used to give it. And whenever you think about it, it gets real deep, and we fall down a rabbit hole. So I'm gonna warn you again that you'll start seeing it in everything, and not just this, but symbols that look like Saturn, that are the swish off Nike, and all these things can come to you too. But sacred geometry and the way people build things, because we want symmetry and something that looks nice. And you'd be surprised, but right now you could take your desk and stuff like that, and most everything you've got is built off a ratio, and it has sacred geometry into it. They're going to give you a list here in a minute, and we'll get down to it. And that list is nothing. I've watched a video where a guy for about 40 minutes just said it and showed a picture. I tried to find it, and I was going to bring it on here, and because he's just saying and going, for me to do anything at all, I'd have to slow it down. And then thinking it's like 38 minutes long or something. And he talks a little at the end, and he talks a little bit at the first, and then just goes and just calls out things that have sacred geometry into them, and blah blah blah. And I think there's one that he actually doubles up in there. Oh, naughty. But I mean, he's doing a picture every 5 seconds or so, and you can imagine how many pictures he adds up in that amount of time. But a lot of them are stupid, and you just show a building, and it's like, just, you don't see it and stuff. But what was cool, on about half these things, he had the picture done, and then he had taken paint shop and went over the part and go, see? So it'd go, pow. And then all of a sudden go, you don't see it? Pow, see? You don't see it? Pow, see? How about pow, see? And so it's pretty neat to go something like that. I tried to find it. I'm going to continue. Usually in my luck, after I get through with the little series here, it'll be somebody will pop it up, and then I'll later have to do another thing about it. Quite often that's how I get doubling up on things. Ancient Greek mathematicians first studied what we call the golden ratio now because of its frequent appearance in geometry. The division of a line into an extreme and mean ratio, or the golden section, is important in geometry of regular pentagrams. So again, I'm telling you, it has to do with the pentagram. Oh, that's witches and every. Oh, yeah, magic. Yeah, you bet. Damn straight. And pentagons. Oh, and this is a laid down 3D representation. But if you paid attention, whenever you go this, when you do it all off circles, you got a Vesica Pisces running through it right there. And if we were to not do this as a laid down or a twisted, but a real proportional version, then it would have them crisscrossing all over and making the startings of a flower of life for a reason. According to one story, 5th century BC mathematician Hippasus, got a picture? Yeah, this guy looks a little gruntled, doesn't he? So he's a Pythagorean philosopher. He discovered the golden ratio is neither a whole number nor a fraction, but an irrational number, meaning that you can't resolve it. He sat and tried, and it way down into the numbers and stuff, like people have done with pi and stupid things. When he did this, it was surprising Pythagoreans around, supposedly. And Euclid's Elements, so this is a book that he had put out, and it talked about how the elements of the earth were based on these things. And not only that, but the states of matter are built upon these things. Yeah, that's how it all works. And nobody could see anything. Man, this is a bad time, and I'm breaking into it way too early, but nobody could see anything small enough to try to give an idea. But there's this ancient tale that only a couple people said one little thing about. And it seems like in one tale it's just one. And this is like the all-seeing eye of the Stygian Witches and stuff. So you think of a crystal ball. And you know how that kind of has a lensing effect and it makes things go upside down. They said that they'd use something like this to discover the stars. And it made no sense to anybody at all. But if you figured out that you could take a piece of Vesica Pisces shaped glass, whether you found one luckily out in the desert once or somehow it formed out of it, or from crystal, that if you had that a couple of inches away from things, it would be like a magnifying glass. And that's amazing, because now whenever you look at grains of sugar, which instead of being fine processed sugar like we have, the original grains that would come out of it, it was always forming back in crystals. And when you look at these crystals, they're the shape of those damn dice we were looking at all over it. And there might be perfect squares in it, but some of the squares had the corner knocked off. But they noticed when the corner was knocked off, that was a facet, just like whenever you do jewelry. Jewelry. And you cut the facets around onto it, and what you cut off is a little pyramid, and it's a 4-sided dice. Doesn't have to be the same size. There's ratio involved. I'm just going to go on. A straight line is said to have been cut in extreme and mean ratio, when as the whole line is to the greater segment, so is the greater to the lesser. That's old world speak, and y'all aren't going to get that. Let me see here. See this? See this idea here? And even though this stretch is longer than that right there, the whole thing right here adds up to that. But if you were to start now from that point, you can start making deductions. And this is where the intelligence of the Caucasian mind comes in. For A and B is to A as A is to B. What? It just starts to become logical little points of it here. A and B is to A as A is to B also. Yeah? Oh, okay. All right. Good. Okay, you got it. So, by the same token, you can take a whole surface and sections, such as A and B and B and A and everything, and get this same concept out of it, right? And a ratio of what's what. Now, this isn't even, I don't think, built on the golden ratio. Looks close, but Probably is, because it's in it. But the Sumerians were using the same concept to lay out land, and they said they did it every year to reset the plots of land. And there are inklings that that's what happened in Egypt every year too, and so they had to set up the land and get it all lined up on whose was where and plant that crap, because here comes the flood. So everything's done preemptively, but if I want to make up a land, then it's cut up into here. And all these other ratios for at the end of, well, it's going to have to be part 2, I'm sure. I can show you a guy that's making the golden ratio that goes around in flowers and sunflowers and things like that with a compass, and how he actually goes about it, and why maybe what somebody said, and I haven't verified this, why the pyramid's off by just a touch. Wasn't supposed to be. And all it takes is whenever you start doing the spirograph pattern, if you end off by just a hair, and if you transpose that half a dot along a few hundred meters of a pyramid side, you'll get off just a couple of inches. And they talk about how close to exactly right on it is, and some people say, well, maybe north was wrong back then. Yeah, maybe the North Pole was a little off, and they were more right than you think. A few things about it. Where am I? 35, 36. Damn it. So how do I finish this off and make it good so we can do a part 2 and feel like it's more separate than anything? So they talked about all these guys, and Euclid and all these guys back and forth, and that they had studied it, and what they're studying at is the Library of Alexandria. And everybody says crap about Library of Alexandria and and everything else. Understand that Library of Alexandria was full of their information, but also the ancient Egyptians' information. But they also got information from all kinds of different ones, and I believe these Phoenician travelers that came too, and they got some of their information would have been using that compass like you do to navigate, and that uses the exact same thing too. And perhaps in seeing how they were utilizing it, oh snap, and he figured out it again. But by saying he figured it out again, they were already using it. And what's odd about that is they say, well, this guy seemed to come on with it and this, that, and the other. And I go, yeah, you can see that in the math thing, but here's this building and here's this rock thing. Both of them predate the guys you're talking about, but right here is that flower thing. And if you want to say they just made a design whippy-woo, you can, but you wouldn't get me to believe it, because I know it goes back to the ancient Sumerians, and we've even found it at Göbekli Tepe with the 3 major circles that run inside that thing, and you can put those together, and here's that Pythagorean concept already too. So what we call Pythagorean, we might want to figure out another person's name for. Only problem is we have no idea of naming any of these people that were at Göbekli Tepe, much less some of the people that are accounted for it. For even in the Greeks there, it seems like that was a culmination of people and things, and they say, oh, well, he did it all. Well, he's standing on the back of giants, looking at their information, and then, oh snap, right? It was already going on because the pyramids are built on it. Even just the ancient mastabas and step pyramids had the concept in it. Sacred geometry, that's why we call it sacred geometry, is because it was kept sacred from a time long, long ago, longer than you're willing to believe, or, well, most of you are probably starting to, but longer than academia would love for you to believe. And I'm not taking anything away from these guys to say that they found it pseudo-independently, but hell, if they would have walked out of Sace and taken a look up there north, well, you got to go a little more north than that to be able to do it, Come up the delta a little bit, and bam, there's a pyramid based on it right there. That temple right there, same thing. Oh, what about this one? Same thing. Well, how about if I go up to Dendera? Same thing. Same thing. It keeps going, people. And I'll show you that through these. So far, it's planned to be about 5 videos, and I've decided that I'm going to try to cut that down some. But I don't want to just go, here's your finger, here's your foot, that makes a mile, here's a mile, there's this, that, and the other, here's how they figured out the sun, peace. Because it's doesn't seem like that would really, you'd be sitting there going, what? Some sun to football, what? And it's not going to help anybody if you want to know it. And if you want to know it deeper than me, and I'm going to show you, then we probably ought to take a course. But then you'd have to find somebody that knows what the hell they're talking about and aren't going to try to mislead you, because a lot of these guys will try to mislead you. Like, say they'd start off the course and saying nobody knew this crap until this Greek guy once figured it out with his Pythagorean theorem and Euclid's elements, and it's like, dude, well, that was already going on. All they've done is notice the ratio going on in a sunflower and all these things all over, right? But other people had noticed this crap long before, and you're saying nobody tried to figure out how to use it, but yet the buildings around that man that are way older than him are built on it. Yeah, so we've got that. It's not going to be hard at all to prove that. And I really felt, until they found this sacred geometry about Göbekli Tepe, that I was going to have a pretty easy time showing you ancient Sumerian stuff, which is edging on predating pyramid stuff, if you want to give their dating on the pyramid. But then they found Göbekli Tepe in doing it, and whenever I did my video and showed about it, I talked about how the 2 pillars, and you make 2 circles, there's a Vespa Pisces, this is east, blah, 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 and everything, and they don't even really catch that. And I was going to try to bullshit my way through that and say I can't find any measurements, but it looks like it, and I'd like to see if it was right on. Well, these guys did the 3 of them together in one giant one, and how they had laid it out, and they're like, it couldn't be off more than 7 inches or half the width of one of those pillars standing up. Somebody else said, this one's higher than that one. If you figure it out on the lay of the ratio, if you were standing in plane with it, then that actually would be right, wouldn't it? So we're about to end this one, and I hate the fact that I haven't got through this at all, but I've gotten a lot of information out to you that I want to give you through it all. But you know, we talk about Fibonacci sequences and things like that, and that's what we're fixing to show you in part 2. I'll show you that and start talking about some other things and lead into it. Platonic solids. This is when they figured out polyhedrons and how everything was built out of it. Leonardo da Vinci, right? The famous one himself. And they've talked about how his famous drawing of man was supposedly on it, and then people have checked it to the nth degree and it's not quite, but then they found out his drawing of that man was based on something else. But then look at all these other things, he uses it. And they even say it's in the painting of the Sistine Chapel and Last Supper and things. It's everywhere. In fact, they even mention in here how it's possibly in Mona Lisa and all these other things that people have been looking at. And so this Greek letter pi has a ratio. See if they show the symbol of the golden ratio. That's just a symbol. The symbol cross of the golden ratio looks like the Templar cross, the one that's a little bit long of a stick. Still has the cross up there, and where that cross point out at is versus the stick is making this declamation and saying it's right there. And what's that in? It's in Denmark flag and all kinds of other people's flags too, but that cross that's there also crisscrossing means the 4 seasons. And whenever they show them diagonal cutting through, like in the British flag, this is supposed to be the equinoxes, and you can see that whenever somebody starts using this compass in just a minute when we start the second part of this. So I'll see you there.